Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Fallout Season 1, Episode 7. It's called The Radio. So spoilers for the episode, and it is the penultimate episode of the season. And it's definitely setting up a lot of things for the finale. And it's almost a more difficult episode to kind of remember everything and talk about, because it's, I've been talking a lot in the recent episodes, ever since like episode 3. Each episode's typically focused on like 2 plots, and that's it. And it'll usually let something sit out for a little bit. Whereas this episode, we've got Maximus, we got Lucy, we've got the Ghoul, we've got the flashbacks with Coop back in the before the war. We've got the Vault 33 stuff with Norm, and then we've even got the Squire character coming back in. Was it Thaddeus? Am I remembering that name right? That sounds right. Thaddeus, yeah, that's right. Just double checking. Like, we have everyone in here, so there's a lot of different things going on, and I think it's because it's the penultimate episode and they want to have everything in place for the finale. And I'm happy where most of the stuff is set up for the finale. But I definitely don't think I like this episode as a package quite as much as I do a lot of the previous ones, just because it inherently is less focused and a lot more a little bit of everything. We'll go through each sort of character and plot lines and sort of see where we are going into this last episode. The big thing in the vaults, of course, I mean, the cliffhanger at the end of the episode is that Norm has pretended to be the Overseer, Betty, and has contacted Vault 31 and is going into 31 at the end. They open the door for him and he goes in. I actually thought it was going to cut to the credits as soon as the door closed. As soon as the big vault cog door finished closing, it went to black, and I thought, oh, the credits are going to start playing. And I do almost think it probably should have, because the actual little extra moment after that, where it's just Norm going down the hall and he hears like a mechanical noise, I mean, maybe that is indicating that no, this is mostly robots in here, and maybe we'll see where that picks up next time. But I almost felt like it would have just been a better ending to just close, on the door closing. But that's the big kind of thing. We're going to finally see Vault 31 in the finale. He's inspired to do this because throughout the episode, not only do the raiders get killed, their food is poisoned by someone, and I'm presuming someone from 31, like Steph. They're basically drafted which ones of the Vault Dwellers are going to Vault 32, and that includes Chet and Steph. And would you believe it, they've given Steph the interim Overseer, right? Because I was thinking this actually, as she started making this announcement, I was like, wait, you're not going to have a vote? Don't you always have votes for the Overseers? But she does say interim, which does suggest that, okay, we need someone to be in charge immediately, but you can have a vote once you've got things up and running. Not everyone wants to go. Our guy Woody, he he does not want to go to Vault 32. He has an emotional goodbye. Well, he even tries to back out of it, but the guards with his SWAT helmets on don't let him go anywhere. I dig that Chet seems like, while he's going with Steph and it feels like he's content with that, there is just that look on his face as the door shut into Vault 32, where it just feels a little bit more ominous, like he's not entirely sure. It's like he's convinced himself that this is a good thing, and that's kind of what he says to Norm, but you can tell there's doubts in there. You can tell that he's not, something's fishy about all this, and he's kind of denying the evidence of what him and Norm saw in 32 before it was cleaned up, but here we are. Also, Steph just casually stuffing ice down her crotch. Is this something pregnant women? Well, they're not pregnant anymore, but it's women who have just had babies. Is this something that women actually do? Because I don't think I've ever heard of this before. Was that all the Vault stuff? I think that was all the Vault stuff, more or less. Yeah, just Betty being kind of mysterious and something's clearly going on. I think the big thing was the fact that someone from Vault 31 has been appointed Overseer. Norm gives Chet that look like, hey, see, she's from 31. That's another one. They always seem to be doing that. I guess the line from the other Vault to go over to Lucy and Maximus that kind of leads into this a little bit, or ties into this, is Lucy's, held captive and interrogated, but it's not actually as bad as we kind of maybe thought it was, because it turns out that the original people in the Vault were doing these bad experiments on mixing people with radiation and things like that and whatever, creating mutants. But the people who currently live there are just taking care of these victims that are still in these tanks. That's at least what they say. But they're mad at Lucy for going in there and fighting some of them and like bringing violence, and they want rid of her. But they show her this tape basically showing that the Gulpers, for example, were people once. In fact, there's even a joke where the overseer's like, "Yeah, that was my great uncle" or something like that. That's all like fine. That's all interesting and kind of amusing. But the real thing that stuck out is when the guy says, "What was the experiment in your vault?" And Lucy just goes, "We didn't have an experiment." And these two just look at each other and be like, "Well, you being naive is not an excuse for what you did," and then it just progresses from there. But it really does suggest that every single vault is an experiment for something. And I would argue that Vault 31, 32, 33 is a trio or an experiment maybe as a whole for something. And that's maybe what we're going to get to the meat of with Norm in the last episode. But that was a nice little tease. Like, just because they didn't know that they were in some kind of experiment, maybe it's more of a social experiment than a science experiment, and or a physical biological experiment like Vault 4 is. It's something else a little bit different, because obviously that's still a science. But basically Maximus sees that Lucy's being carted off, which looks like she's been taken to be executed, and it even looks like that up until the last possible second, until they just say, "You're sentenced to death by being released into the wasteland." And then the machete or whatever he's got, he just starts like cutting the restraints really slowly. This is definitely a moment that's played for like a big punchline. It's a big comedy moment, and it's all right. Although part of me was thinking, can't you just release the restraints? Because it's not like it's just like a rope or something like that. It's like actual restraints with fasteners. So I'm like, can't you just take them off? I guess. So yeah, I felt a bit like silly for ceremonial purposes. What I did like about this, though, is this idea that Maximus literally has to choose between this new comfortable life that he's fallen in love with and going to help Lucy. And there's even a moment where he looks down at the popcorn and looks back up like he's making a choice. But he goes and steals the power core, he puts it in his suit, he comes in and starts throwing people around, even though by this point Lucy's already been told she's been let go, which is actually what Lucy wanted anyway. She wants to go find her dad. So there's really nothing serious happening here, but Maximus comes in playing the hero and throwing people around. Lucy has to talk him down, and then immediately he's like, "Oh, okay, might want to check out these two over here that I threw into a wall," or whatever. But the bigger emotional and character building stuff with these two is that once they get outside, Lucy turns and says, "We can't take their fusion core, their power cell." And he's like, "Yeah, but without it, this armor doesn't work, and I can do good things with it. I can help you." And she's like, "No, like my dad wouldn't be able to live with the fact if we like doom a whole society because they have no power, because their backup power only works for a few days, then that wouldn't be worth it. That would be wrong." So he makes the choice to go with what she's saying, and it does feel like a character moment for Maximus, because Maximus by and large has been very self-preserving up until this point and kind of selfish, and he's a likable character, don't get me wrong. Like he's very likable. In fact, this episode has big strides for him where he opens up to Lucy, and it's kind of nice actually that it's the complete opposite reaction to when Thaddeus was told who he was. She immediately doesn't really blame him for what he's done. Obviously he doesn't give her every detail, but he gives her the broad strokes that he's not really Thaddeus, he lied, it's not his power armor. And she's like, "Look, I just threw acid in a guy's face." That was in her defending herself at the end of the last episode. So the wasteland sucks, it makes us do bad things, I'm not perfect either. And it does feel like a genuine sweet moment. And this is like after they've thrown the power cell down into the chute that they fell down in, so it's back in the vault. So again, much like the stuff at the supermarket with all the drugs and all that, this once again was Lucy making this moral choice at the end of a quest. I think that's one of the interesting things about the show so far, is that at least for Lucy's side of things, it really does feel like she's having these encounters where she's running into new little communities or new little towns, and by the end of her time in that little area, she's making a moral choice. That very much mirrors the way the video game kind of plays out in a lot of ways. So I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, they're united, and Lucy even says, "Hey, when this is all done, I want you to come live with me in Vault 33." And it does feel like come live with me, as in, come stay with me. Like, she even brings up she was meant to get married to a stranger, and that most strangers suck except Maximus, which is actually what kind of guilts him into opening up. He doesn't feel like he deserves the praise that he's getting from her, that he's not a good person. So, but she turns around and doesn't say it, but effectively forgives him for any lies that he's told. So obviously, from a TV writing point of view, I'm thinking at this point, oh, these characters are far too happy. They're smiling. It's all genuine and nice. The chemistry's kind of blossoming. He's probably thinking she's going to explode his cock sometime soon. Some bad stuff has to happen soon. That's how writing works, especially since we're like in the penultimate episode of the season. There's no way we're not going into the last episode with drama and stakes and heightened tension and all that. But so yeah, they go off looking, and I think that's them until they run back into Thaddeus, who also gets his own little subplot this episode. We see his foot. Because if you don't remember, Maximus in the armor stepped on his foot the last time they saw each other, and his toe is literally dangling off. It's pretty grisly. It's a CG effect, and if you're really looking closely, I mean, you can tell, don't get me wrong, but it's still quite nasty looking. It still made me kind of go, ugh. That's a bit in the extreme side. He's also a dick because he puts the dog into like the Nuka-Cola cooler at this like a rocket gas station, which is from the games. Like, I remember seeing this at some point. I think this is a sort of a recurring brand in the games as well as this particular garage. He's got the head. He dumps the big bag of weapons and goes on his way. He ends up encountering a very shady doctor type character, and I hesitate to even call him a doctor, but I'd say snake oil salesman, except that he does give him something that is real. Unfortunately, what he gives him to cure his foot in exchange for the power core that he's got on him is basically turns him into a ghoul. Presumably, it's the same shit that Goggins is inhaling. So it magically cures his foot. Like it heals like Wolverine's wounds healing after he's been injured. And it's like, interesting that happened from just taking a little bit of medicine. No bandages, no splints, no nothing else. Just a little bit of medicine. So it's like, okay, well, you've changed, and that comes up a little bit later when he's basically been able to contact the Brotherhood of Steel from this radio tower. And there's this quirky character who works there who's just talking about music, and he's also got booby traps, and he mentions that all the people that have tried to come and get him that are caught in the booby traps are all critics. It really felt like a little bit of a meta commentary on, like, honestly, this felt like Todd Howard, who makes the games, to me. This felt like some sort of weird cartoony version of Todd Howard. I don't know if that's what they were going for, or just in general, some kind of like snob who appreciates the classics, but I got a chuckle out of thinking this was Todd Howard. That'll mean nothing unless you're really familiar with the games and the sort of the people surrounding them. But he ends up trying to shoot Lucy and Maximus when they come up onto the scene, and just empties his clip into nothing. And to be honest, one of the funniest moments of the whole show so far is after he empties the clip, and it doesn't like show, like, you see Lucy and Maximus walking up, and then it cuts to him pulling out his gun, and while he's firing the shots, the camera stays on him. It never like cuts to Lucy and Maximus ducking or dodging or diving for cover or anything like that. It's just him emptying a clip right at the camera, basically. And then when it cuts back to Lucy and Maximus, they're just kind of standing there, and I swear the look on Lucy's face of like, I don't know, not even like judgment necessarily, just of like what the hell was that? Really made me laugh, just because it was like, well, that accomplished nothing. You didn't even come close to hitting us. That was, so that was a good funny beat. But the show is very good with its humor. Like, I would argue maybe the whole sentence to death thing and then the machete like slicing through the restraints is one of the few jokes that's not quite landed with me, just because it was maybe a little over the top. Everything else typically has landed and at least made me chuckle, if not outright laugh. So this was a good little moment. But immediately Thaddeus steps on a booby trap and an arrow goes through his neck. And at first I was like, oh, and then I remember like a second later, oh yeah, he's got like healing powers now. And obviously, quite quickly, Thaddeus is like, or Maximus says, oh hey, I think you're a ghoul. And he's like, oh no, the Brotherhood of Steel will kill me if they find that out. They don't like ghouls being a part of their organization. And Lucy's like, but aren't they the good guys? And both Maximus and Thaddeus, despite being in the organization and like sort of looking up to it and like wanting like praise and adoration for being good boys in it, both of them immediately go, it's a complicated organization. It's not as simple as that. Which is interesting that even people in there, the young and hopefuls, kind of already understand that it's not as black and white as that. And if anything, they're just seeking security in something that isn't morally that great. But hey, they're there. So, anywho, this leads to Lucy and Maximus having their first kiss. Thaddeus runs off. He hands over the head because now he just doesn't want to die. Maximus says, hey, I'll distract them, I'll use this head from a random corpse, and he bashes its face in so it's unrecognizable. And he's like, I'll give them this head, I'll buy you time, Lucy, go find your dad. And she's like, no, I want you to come with me, yada yada. And it's a heroic moment. It's a genuine, like, sort of him doing something for someone else moment, which is new for him. The first kiss they have here, which goes on for longer than you think it should. Like, the Brotherhood of Steel are coming in, and he enjoys the kiss so much that he goes in for a second. And I found that oddly relatable given like his like personality. I thought that worked for him, given that it's probably his first kiss. He liked it a lot, and he thought, I'm going to for a second, even though we're kind of crunched on time here, we have to get going. But the funny part of this, of course, is that she's holding the original severed head, and he's holding this decoy severed head. And as they're kissing, the camera goes down, and the two decapitated heads are smushed together like they're kissing. That's the type of humor that I'm enjoying in this show. That gave me a good little chuckle. That was a nice little bit of a macabre humor. So I'm into it. So that's basically where their plot ends for the episode. Which basically leaves us with the ghoul / the flashbacks, right? The ghoul does have a great scene early on where he comes to this family for information. Like this older brother character who's not in the scene was someone that the ghoul killed and got this letter from that said that they were transporting something from Moldaver, and he's here for questioning. And the dad of this family is, like, understands that he's dangerous. He doesn't want him to kill his family, including his young daughter. So he's like, we'll tell you whatever you want to know, just don't hurt us. And the younger son apparently had like done some courier work for his older brother. And he gives up the location of where Moldaver is, or where he was going to deliver the thing for Moldaver. But the girl says, hey, you're going to take a shot at me because I killed your brother. And even if you don't do it today, you'll come and do it later. So he kills the teenage son, leaving the dad crying, and he walks off. But honestly, I mean, I just sort of described that whole sequence quickly. But I mean, it is worth mentioning this is a genuinely good, tense scene. Like him sitting there eating like some food at the table, especially when we know that he can't actually digest the food. Like we've already kind of set up that he like remembers human food fondly, but can't actually digest it. So he's eating this. I mean, maybe he's okay with meat. Maybe meat's still good. I don't know. But like he's eating this food on the table. It's definitely that kind of the bomb under the table type of like tension where like you're waiting to see what he's going to do. Is he going to kill them? And because the ghoul's this kind of character where I think the hope is that he will find some remnant of humanity despite how much of a sort of cold badass he actually is. I think like if he had killed the whole family, including the young girl, it would have been like, oh no, he can't come back from that in the eyes of the audience. Like in the eyes of the audience, he would just be a villain forever. So I think you have to straddle this interesting line where he can't go too far that he's irredeemable, but he's still cold right now. So what he does here makes some amount of sense, and you understand why he does it, even though it is quite cold. The only other thing we see of him in the future stuff is that he finds the dog, which is interesting because I think I glossed over this last episode, but obviously we had the whole conversation about him asking why dogs aren't allowed in the vault. But they did a good job earlier in the episode last time of establishing that not only does he like his dog, he's very proud that the dog in the movie he did when someone asked about a poster, he's like, hey, that was my real dog. Like, he clearly cares about his dog. So when he comes across this dog again in the main part of the show, I was thinking, oh, they've done a good job of establishing that he's had a connection to a dog in the past. And he's been kind of cold with this dog by saying it's not his dog a couple times. But we see this quick scene where he's at like the campfire and the dog comes up and sort of snuggles in, and he tries to kind of, he's like, hey, sorry, but you're not him, like, you're not my dog. He does eventually put his hand on and claps him, and it's kind of like, again, much like Lucy maybe inspiring something in him, the dog's maybe reminding him of his humanity and when he had a family and all that. So I think that, again, it's another nice little thing there. And, you know, most people watching a TV show will get the oohs and the ahs and like the dog, right? It's a good shortcut to sympathy if you've got a doggo on screen. Yeah, so that was fine. And then the flashbacks, of course, is him at the meeting where Moldaver's talking, and after he makes a little bit of commotion and tries to walk out, Moldaver kind of starts talking to him, and she reveals that she was a scientist who was working with others to basically build unlimited power, like maybe even the fusion cores that are in the show might be even what she was sort of building up to. But Vault-Tec bought all the companies out that were working on this, basically just to shelve it and stop it from happening, because the wars that they're currently fighting in that part of the timeline of the show, she refers to it as the last decade has been a resource war. And the idea that unlimited power that's cheap would mean that they wouldn't have to fight over anything would be bad for Vault-Tec, who profits from fear and war and basically trying to make people feel comfortable when all this stuff's going on. It goes against their business plan. It's kind of like the, like when someone says, oh, they could cure cancer, but it would just, they make too much money from all the care that goes into it. Obviously, that's more conspiracy theory, but it's kind of in that same vein of just how cynical you can get with capitalism and whatnot. So it's a simple enough idea. It kind of like goes back into that what the other guy was talking about, his Native American friend last episode, about them wanting to engineer war and fear because they profit from it. It's really hitting that those flashbacks hard, that theme, that message over and over again. Anyway, she gives him a bug that will tap into his wife's Pip-Boy, which he does connect to, but then kind of like regrets it and throws it in the trash. But then later on, when he's watching the commercials back that he made, he gets second thoughts and goes rummaging through the trash and gets the bug back out. So he does have this listening piece so he can spy on whatever conversation his wife's having. So he's clearly being... He's got enough doubts that he's considering doing this and looking into his wife. Presumably this is how they're going to end up falling apart as a marriage, because, spying on your wife is probably, whether or not she is part of something that's not quite good, she's quite right not to take it very well. There's no getting around that, I don't think. So, but I enjoyed a lot of stuff in this episode. I will say that there's so many things going on, and there's there's a couple of flashbacks. There's a couple scenes with a girl. There's a couple scenes with Thaddeus. There's all the Vault 4 stuff. There's all the Vault 33 and 32 stuff. Because there's so much, none of it gets quite as much time as the plots have done in recent episodes to feel like they've got as full a fleshed out meal. So I will say this definitely felt like an episode that was setting a lot of things up for the finale. And it's mostly really good stuff. It just isn't quite as satisfying as a full episode, I would say, as a lot of the recent ones where, like some recent episodes, it'll set stuff up, for example, with the ghoul and his flashbacks, and then it'll kind of pay off by the end with how he interacts with a character, and it'll feel like you get a full kind of story out of it. This felt more like we have to make sure everyone's in the right place for the finale, so we're doing a little bit of everything. So... I'm excited for the finale. I'm excited to see how this wraps up, and I presume we'll get to Lucy's father and get a little bit of payoff and maybe some reveals from Moldaver, some reveals about Vault 31. I'm curious to see where we go with all this stuff, but I will see you guys next time for the finale within a couple of days, I expect. So thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, hit the like button. It helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support the channel, the movie channel as well, everything we do, and help keep the lights on. But thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?